Okay, so under slightly more advanced is a program which probably not going to find much use in design, but is very much useful for CAM. So example, when we have rings and we need to put an internal sprue and a Y-split, something like this in Grasshopper is super helpful, so you don't have to keep redrawing stuff over and over and over. So we're able to adjust, parametrically some parameters around this item and then output the geometry without having to redraw over and over and over the same Y-split. Okay, so we're going to talk about this for design, for creating base constructs in your design. We're going to do a wedding band using Grasshopper, which is probably the least effective way to produce a wedding band. However, as a learning experience, let's get into it. All right, so I'm going to go to Grasshopper. I'm going to close this just so that we've got nothing on there. I'm going to close Grasshopper as a construct. So from Rhino 6 onwards, Grasshopper is built into Rhino. So to access Grasshopper, you type the command Grasshopper, and you're going to get a new window show up like this. Because I've built lots of Grasshopper stuff before, I have several bits of information there. Normally it'll come up with a little did you know or tutorial. Just dismiss it, get rid of it. We want to work on the background. Okay, so we're going to start a new Grasshopper over here. I'm going to explain to you what Grasshopper does and how it works. All right, so let's have a look at how you draw a circle in Rhino. In Rhino, you'd go type a command circle. Reading on the command line, it says where's the center of the circle. In our case, it's going to be at 0, the center of the world, and then what's the diameter of the circle. In Grasshopper's case, it would be a radius most likely. And you type it, and now you have a circle. But what if you needed that circle a different size? You could take the circle and scale it to exactly the different size you need, but that would be pretty hard to do. What if you had to scale it to exactly 6 millimeters? You have to draw a line from 0 up, shift tab 6 millimeters, move it from its center down to 0, and now you have to try scale this in. Scale from 0 to that quad and snap it down, and now you've got exactly 6. But what if you need 6.2, 6.3? What if you need to change the size of it? So you can see it quickly becomes an awkward thing to do. All right, so let's talk about how you then draw a circle in Grasshopper. So we get rid of this, we come to Grasshopper. Grasshopper is all the same commands as Rhino and a few more. And the same as Rhino, it can be accessed as an icon, accessed from a menu, or accessed from a command line. The Grasshopper command line you access by double-clicking the background. So double-click the background of the development area and type the word circle as you would in Rhino. And all the different kinds of circles you can use are coming up. In our case, we just want a circle defined by a base plane and a radius, so the standard circle. Now you can see that it's already brought out a circle for you on screen with a radius of 1. Now let's talk about the anatomy of a Grasshopper construct. So this is a tool to make a circle. All right, it has inputs always on the left-hand side and has outputs always on the right-hand side. Okay, if you hover your mouse over the input, you can see that input is looking for a plane. The default plane is world XY. What we mean by world XY, if you look in the top view, you can see it's drawing the circle in the top view, and the top view is expressing the X and Y view of the world. The front view or the edge view is a ZX, and then you have ZY. Okay, so if we wanted to draw the circle in this view, we'd be looking for world ZX or world XZ. Right, so let's go to plane, set one plane. You can either come into this viewport, the front viewport, and you can manually adapt it. But if you look at your command line, it's got some shortcuts already for you. All right, so we want the world ZX, which is this one. So click world ZX. Now you'll see the circle is drawn in this plane. All right, so that's the one input looked after. The other input is a radius. It's looking for a number for a radius. A radius is half of the diameter. Okay, so we can put a number in there like this. We can search for number, and we can set one number, and we can set the number to be 1.5. Okay, and we can connect the 1.5 to this. You just simply click and drag with the left mouse button from there to there, and now you have a radius of 1.5, diameter of 3. But that was no better than doing it in regular Rhino. So how do we make this useful? You generally wouldn't use just a number, you'd use a number slider. All right, so The shortcut way to do this, or let me show you the long way, double click the background, look for slider, okay, number slider, and you see that it came out with some default parameters. If you connect the number slider to the radius connector, you'll now see that you can change the size of the circle by dragging the slider, right, which is something you couldn't do in Rhino. We want to give this thing a bit more parameters, so we double click where it said the word radius over here, this little grey area, the dark grey area, double click that. We'll open the parameters for this. We can give it a name. We can call it radius of the circle if it didn't already have it. This is the amount of rounding, so 1, 1.1, 1.11, 1.111, 3 decimals, so you only really need 1 over here, okay? And what's the maximum size of this? The minimum size of a finger would be probably a radius of 5, and the maximum would be, I don't know, 25 if you had a really big finger. And you can set a numeric value now at about 16.8, which is roughly size N and a bit, I think. Alright, so now we have this huge thing up here. So our first problem is, of course, we want a diameter. We're working with a diameter. Radius is only half of that, okay? So you can divide this value by 2 before it gets in there and call this a diameter. So division, double click the background to bring up the command line, division, bring up a division node, connect the radius to one side, so it's going to be A divided by B. We can set a number for B. You can right click and set a data item, or you could have brought in a number, okay, and the number we could set an item is 2. Commit the changes, connect it to here, and then the output from that we connect to this. And so now we have the correct diameter. So this one we can now change to say diameter. And now it's the right 6. So when I say that it's 5, it actually is 5. All right, so now we've got a circle within the parameters we want to work that works for us. Okay. There is a little bit of a cheat you can do to make this simpler. Right, you don't need all this nonsense over here because Grasshopper has got a way for you to cheat on the input. All right, so if you look at the radius input, if you right click it, there's a few things you can do with it. One, you can rename it. There's a couple of data things which we're not going to get into now. The expression is what you want. Anything that comes in is x. So if you enter the expression, any number that comes in here, represented by x, divide it by 2. Let's commit those changes. Now if we connect this directly, we can throw away all this other nonsense, and the number 13.8 coming in here is being divided by 2. Okay, so you can see it's become 6.9. So that's just a little bit about cheating and not having to use all those extra nodes. So again, let's look at how a wedding band is constructed. You have a finger size, then you have a cross-section shape. So let's draw, I guess, a rectangle as our cross-section tape. Rectangle, create a rectangle on a plane. That's what I'm after. Okay. So again, you're going to see that it's what plane are you working on. So currently it's in world XY in the top view. We want to change that plane. Set one plane. We're going to go in the command line. This time I want to do it as a cross-section in this view, in the right-hand view, so that's world ZY. There it is there. So you'll now see that we have this drawing a rectangle over there. It's got the ability to change its X, its Y, and whether the corner has a radius or not. Alright, so we're going to get another slider. I'm going to teach you a faster way to make a slider now. If you need a slider that has 1 decimal point, double click the background and enter a number. I'm going to go as 5.0. Okay, it's automatically going to bring out a slider centered at 5.0, and you can go 5 down and 5 up. Right, so we can connect that to X over here. We're going to do another one, or you can just take this, you can Control C and Control V. You can copy and paste it, and you can connect it to Y. Right. So now you have a rectangle that you're able to control the height of, and a rectangle you're able to control the width of. All right. To make it easier for you to use, you can double click this and you can call it width, and you can double click this and you can call it thickness. Oopsie, type that properly. Okay. So you now have a rectangle starting from 0, you've come out, and if you did want to radius the corners softly, you could attach a radius to this. So let's type another smaller number, 3 points. So I'm going to make it 0.25. Okay, and I'm going to connect that to the radius. You see what it's doing? It's making the corners a lot softer, or a little bit softer on the edge there. Okay, so now let's talk about the next problem we have. It's brought it out in the middle of the world because the plane is in the middle of the world. All right. So what we can do is we can find a point directly in Z and snap to that point instead. Okay. So I'm going to go create from this plane, we can extrapolate that we've got a circle. We're going to find the bottom of it, which is in Z. So we're going to create a new point. So if you look at a point is a vector. And if you see under the vector tools, we've got point tools. A whole lot of different things you can do with tools. In this case, we want to construct a point. All right, we want to make a point. So what is a point? A point is anywhere in Rhino in the world. So if I take a point object and stick it over here, and I move it up, okay, that point lives at an address in Rhino. Its address is this far up, this far left, and this far over. So you can triangulate its position from 0 to that point. Okay. The way to have a look at that is you can type the word what, and these are coordinates, x, y, z. All right. So it's 4.762 millimeters high. It's over by 2.5 millimeters, and it's to the right by minus 5.9 millimeters. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to construct that point manually now. So we're going to say I want to make a point. I want to make it at a specific x, a specific y, and a specific z. In our case, the middle of the world is already the correct place. We just want to move it down. Okay. So we want to move it down to the same as the bottom of the circle. We're going to drag this out to Z. And remember, we need it halfway because that point is now all the way up. All right, so remember that we can do some mathematics here. We can go to the expression. We're going to say that x is to be divided by 2. That will make half our problem go away. The other part of the problem is now it's on top of the ring. It doesn't really matter. It's on the top or the bottom. If you want it to be on the bottom of the ring, you change that expression to say x multiplied by minus 2, or x divided by minus 2. Apologies. All right. So now that point is on the bottom. Okay. We now want to move this thing that we want to sweep. We want to move it from its top middle point down to here. Okay. So we want to find its top middle, which is half of its width and all of its height. So let's do that. So we've got a point that we want to move to. We've got to find the point we want to move from. Okay. And we have a rectangle. So this rectangle has two things we know. It has a width. Half of its width would be here, and all of its height would be here. So all the way up and all the way over is where this rectangle is. So we need to take this width number, we need to divide it by 2, and the thickness is all the way through. So we're going to create another point, make a point object over here. We're going to bring the width over, have a look at y. Okay, so this is y in the width, and we're going to divide that by 2 because we don't want it here. We want to divide that by 2, x divided by 2. Okay. Now it's back to halfway, but its z needs to go all the way up, so we're going to bring its z to there. So now we've got a point here, and we can now move. We can move this item from this point to this point. All right, and we'll do it 100% accurately every single time. So now we're going to do a move. Same as Rhino, you've got a move command. Okay. So what is the geometry we want to move? We want to move it. This is the geometry, and we want to move it from this point minus this point. Okay, so we're going to take a subtract, or you can multiply the points by. There's a couple of different ways to do this. So we want to do a subtraction. Subtraction. I'll take this point, subtract that point, and move it in here. And if you get it the wrong way around, just swap the nodes. All right, we got it right the first time. So we've now moved it to this point, subtracted from that point, gives you a new point over here. All right, so we're ready nearly for the last part of this. Okay, so I'm going to bring this in, okay, like that. I'm going to hide everything we don't need. We no longer need to see the circle. In fact, we never needed to see the circle. It just helps our brain work logically. If we did, we could actually delete that circle. We don't need it. Okay. Everything else we can hide. So we're going to grab everything except that last profile. We're going to highlight all of it. We're going to middle click it, and we're going to click the little guy with a thing over his eyes to hide them. So now we've only got a profile. The last thing we're going to do is the same as lesson 1. We're going to do a revolve. Revolution. Okay. All right. So the plane we want to work in, the axis, and the domain. All right. So there's the curve. Okay. We need to set an axis. So the axis is, remember from lesson 1, the axis was swinging around. So we're going to go inside here. We're going to set one line from 0 straight out. Okay. And then, of course, the degree of the revolution has already been set. So we can take this, we can hide it. We no longer need it. So now we have a wedding band. Let's output it as a brep. So a brep is a basic representation, or you can output it as a geometry. Geom. It allows you to hide everything else you don't need. So stick that in there. You can hide all of this. Right, so now you have a piece of geometry, which is a wedding band. If you go back to your controllers over here, so now every time you need a ring, if you move these nicely to each other, you can now create a ring, or as many rings as you like, in any thickness with any amount of parameters. So you can change the size of the ring, you can change the width of the ring, you can change the thickness of the ring, and the amount of radius you've got on the corners. Okay, so that's when you would use Grasshopper, when you need to do, you know, the same thing over and over. If you make a lot of these wedding bands, and this would be worth your while producing a script for this. All right, like I said, for design, probably not as useful. For CAM, very useful. Okay, guys, I'll put the script in the chat with us, and you guys can have a play with it.